My role here at Emerge is that I'm the Director of Emergency Services, pronouns she, her, and hers. And a little bit about what we do is so much. So we're the sole provider of domestic violence services here in Southern Arizona. And a part of that is having different programs that holistically address the varying impacts that domestic violence can have on an individual's life and on a family's life as well. And so we have a range of services, anywhere from our emergency shelter to hotline services that are 24/7 multilingual. We have 2 community offices available staffed with advocates that are knowledgeable in different areas like legal matters, housing, you name it, family matters, court systems, a lot of different things that unfortunately victims of violence are trying to navigate on a daily basis. We also have support groups available for children, for adult women, and we have varying services for men as well.
Can you talk about how the pandemic is affecting your work and the people that you serve?
We're trying to really tap into that resiliency that we have as an agency and think thoroughly and thoughtfully of how can we still provide services in a time where other programs, other places are shutting down or pausing. And it's important for us to maintain a level of presence so our community knows that we are here to support them and serve them in all the same very ways. And so we definitely had to think creatively of how we were going to do that. We moved to doing a lot of telecommuting services. So that was incredibly exciting to see how we can jump back so quickly to be able to not skip a beat in terms of the services we're providing. We didn't shut down our shelter. We remained open and just started to think really thoughtfully, how can we do that in a way that has safety always at the top priority of our minds and of our services. That said, what I know to be true is that there's a lockdown, and not total, there's a shelter in place, but that has natural consequences that are not intended when it deals with domestic violence. And I know that there are many people in our community right now who are in an abusive home and are unable to leave. And for some of the reasons that were there before COVID, and definitely new ones that are now present. That can include anything like not being able to leave because a lot of family and friends are starting to be a little bit more less willing maybe to have their doors open. And that makes sense, right? So when we're supposed to have social distancing, a number of people in one place, it impacts the idea of bringing in someone new from the quote unquote outside. I know that there are new tactics that are being used, or maybe some similar ones, just in different ways. So there's not always physical violence present in a home where there's domestic violence. And so there are other tactics like control over someone's food, control over surveillance, the isolation of keeping from somebody from being able to talk even over through Zoom, like you and I are doing right now, from being able to go into the outside, and a lot of blame. So if somebody's considering leaving, then an abusive partner might blame them for the potential risk that they're putting themselves and their children under. So there are a lot of different tactics that are being used right now that make it that much more harder to leave in an abusive situation.
Wow. Are you seeing tactics like that increasing? Is there a way to measure that?
I think the way that we measure it is through the times where our participants, that's how we refer to those who are seeking support services from us. We hear it through their own testimonies when they are able to reach out. Maybe they're finding really creative ways to be able to create some distance between themselves and the person they're sharing the home with that is abusive. And they're sharing with us what that looks like for them in their home. And that is through the Zoom calls or through the hotline services where they're describing how this is playing out in their home.
So how can people reach out to you? I mean, obviously it's a really tricky situation right now and dangerous for many. How, what advice do you have for someone who needs your services?
Absolutely. So I think creativity is the name of the game right now, right? I first and foremost want to really stress that we are completely open and operating. We don't yet have the ability to have folks come into our offices, but we have complete telecommuting services available, and all they have to do is call our community offices and set up an appointment to do that. We're looking at ways to equip people with the technology that they need to be able to have those conversations. And we also have our hotline, as I mentioned earlier today, that it's 24/7. And that's really important to stress because I would say to somebody who's experiencing that right now that you are the best measure of when it is safest for you to be able to reach out. And sometimes that looks like maybe when they're walking their dog, maybe when they are getting the mail, or watering the plants outside. Maybe that's when somebody is sleeping. And so that's why our services are 24/7 on that hotline.
If someone in the community wants to help, if somebody watching this wants to support your work, how can they do that?
So one of the top ways that I would say that is to keep conversations going. I think a lot of power is in silence. In keeping subjects like domestic violence taboo, I think that that's really important to continue having conversations with family and friends. I think that if you know somebody who's going through abuse, please have them know that they can reach out to Emerge in the different ways that I'm describing. And it's important for folks to know that we don't have an agenda when they reach out. A lot of people, despite not even because of the pandemic, but they may not even be ready to leave that relationship. They may not even want to. And that's completely okay. There's no judgment on our end. And that's something that I would stress to folks that are also trying to support their loved ones going through abuse, is to not impose that agenda, that desire for us, for them to leave that relationship, and to not judge their choices because they are the ones that know what's best for them and their families. So there's those different ways that we can support folks that are going through abuse, and absolutely through donations. We are definitely receiving donations and continue to accept them.
Great. And they can do that on the website?
They could do that through the website. There's a list of different things available there that are top needed items. And you can also bring it to our administrative office. And again, all of the addresses to those offices are on our website. And a few items include sanitizing items, those paper goods like toilet paper, paper towels, thermometers, a number of different things that you can see through our emergecenter.org website.
What are you doing to take care of yourself? What might you say to another person in a position similar to yours about getting through this time?
I think it's really important that I've learned for myself is to practice what we preach, right? We talk about prioritizing our care, physical and emotional, and that's so important during these times. I really deeply believe that self-care is community care. And it's important that we collaborate, keep that conversation going of what are you doing, here's what we're doing, so that we can do the exchange of information of those best practices, along with making sure that the folks that are reaching out to us that are at most risk and most vulnerable, that we are being mindful of how we are continuing to creatively provide support and services to them.
Any sort of anecdotes about the last few months?
There's several right there. I mean, one that I could think about is through that we can continue to offer meaningful support through these type of Zoom interactions. One of the things that we are doing is providing really culturally specific support groups that also intersect with domestic violence. And so we have one of our groups called the Sister Circle and the Queens group. And so in both of those, I think it is incredibly meaningful to be able to connect with somebody who knows very similar lived experiences as you might have, and to look around the room and to see women who you don't need to explain the different ways that that intersection impacts domestic violence, and not even that, but also our healthcare system or the services that you can access as maybe a woman of color. And so within those groups, it's incredibly wonderful to hear about the different ways that they can continue to connect despite the shelter in place through the use of this technology. And to be able to hear that supportive voice still within your home, and to talk about how this is impacting you through the different identities that you connect to.
Who are your super heroes? Who inspires you right now?
I would say the women in my life, right? And that's across the board in my personal home life, in my through my friendships, through my family, through my elders, and also at the women here at Emerge. The leadership and the support that I receive from them, the community of sisters that I have within that group is incredible. And so yeah, those would be my Shiros. Yeah, but to be non-binary as well. I think that the people who I see here every day, past the hours that they were scheduled to be here, and continue to do the support to make sure that services and the quality of them are never jeopardized. The tears, the sweat that I see people put through to make sure that people are feeling loved and cared for unconditionally. Those would be the people who identify as as those people that I admire.
Anything else? Any other thoughts? Anything you wanted to share that we haven't been over yet?
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing that I was thinking about in reflection of the questions for today's interview is also whose voices are not represented at the table, typically at the table. And I know that this week was a really important one as we elevated the voices of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And as we saw the falling of a individual who I believe, and I apologize if I don't say the name correctly, Ahmed, who was murdered in such a way. And I think that that's such an important opportunity through way of this platform to elevate their story, their voices, in that it all matters, race matters. When we talk about COVID, when we talk about domestic violence, when we talk about social services, nonprofit work, in every single conversation that should be represented and elevated, because if not, then we continue to lose lives where we don't need to. An intersectional approach to our work as nonprofits and as stakeholders in this community who have access to resources and services. I think things like outreach is incredibly important. I think it's incredibly important for us to consider what questions we're asking when interfacing with somebody who doesn't share the same lived experiences as you might have. And so it's really important to make sure that our services are led by the voices and the people who are coming to us for support. And so as it relates to race, for instance, I think it's incredibly important to ask them, what is it that they need from us in order for them to feel safe as they access the services and support that we can provide. I think it's important that we also ask for feedback, and that we open and create a as safe as possible environment for them to be able to be open and honest in terms of how we could be doing our work better and more diligently.